with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I believe all are present at this table this evening, but Matt and Jeff are absent. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? By Stacy?
Second.
Second by Tom. Any comments or questions, concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. On our consent agenda this evening is the check wire transfer disbursement summary, bank reconciliation statements for June, July, August, and September 2012, the board meeting minutes from October 8th, and the work session from October 22nd, donations of equipment to be used by special education students at Red Tail Ridge Elementary, $1,000 from Luis and Linda Ruby for Hidden Oaks Middle School, classroom supplies and desk chair from Office Max for Five Hawks kindergarten teacher Mrs. Bender, $500 from Burnsville Lions Club for school supplies and field trips for struggling families at Glendale Elementary, $705 from Mark Eimers, M&M and I Film for special items at Glendale Elementary. The resignations as listed, and I believe that's it. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Todd, second.
Second.
By Tom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. And now we'll move on to our Laker Pride or showcase.
Yes.
Recognition.
Recognition. As you all know, our school district has been in partnership with the Prior Lake Rotary for many years, and in this past year we partnered with them on the Lakefront Music Fest, and in particular our LABC, our Laker Athletic Booster Club, and our PAA, our Patron of the Arts groups, both participated in selling buttons and raffle tickets throughout the summer. So we're here tonight so that our Prior Lake Rotary members can present the check of $22,767. But before that, I've invited Thomas Ritchie and Libby Bingham, both students at Prior Lake High School, are representing each of those different activities, to come up and tell us a few words. So, Thomas, would you like to start? You were here first, so. Thomas Ritchie is going to talk to us about the value of patrons in the arts and the impact that the arts have had on him as a high school student.
Right here.
Right there is great.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Well, like I said in my other speech, the PAA just really gives me an opportunity to express myself in a way I never could have possibly imagined, with speech and theater and all sorts of activities that are under the PAA umbrella. Students like me and just friends of mine and all been able to participate in theater and express ourselves in, again, ways that I never could have really imagined before. Like I said in my other speech, I'd be sitting at home practicing weird voices alone in my basement, getting weird looks from my parents over there, wondering what I was doing. So, without the PAA, I would be a weird person in my basement making weird voices to myself. So. And that's never something you want out of a son or anyone, really. So, yeah. I'd like to thank the PAA, and I'd like to thank everyone here for having me here. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Libby Bingham is here to talk about her participation in LABC.
Well, my name is Libby Bingham, and I have participated in the Laker athletics since my freshman year, and it's been a big part of my life, actually. When I was 6 years old, my mom actually passed away, and my dad put me in athletics to boost my confidence and meet new people and everything, and it's really made an impact on my life. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone that has contributed to that. And we would like to thank the Rotary for allowing the school district to participate as a nonprofit partner for the 2012 Music Fest. Together, the LABC and PAA sold over 2,000 raffle tickets and provided 500 volunteers, hours which were primarily performed by the students of the school for this event. It was an opportunity for our students to participate in a community-sponsored event and to feel the sense of pride and accomplishment in doing so. The funds raised by the Music Fest will help pay for some of the students' awards, such as the Athena Award, the Daggett Award, as well as the Kempert Award, to name a few. We will also be assisting the Activities Department with funding for activities shuttle buses to and from the high school, and on-site trainers, concussion impact studies, as well as helping some of our individual sports with financial needs for uniforms and helmets. We appreciate all of your support that the Rotary has given to the Laker Athletics, and we look forward to a continued relationship with them for the 2013 event. So thank you.
Okay, if our Prior Lake Rotary representatives, Paul Perez, and if Adam is here, and Libby, and Thomas, and Sean, and Debbie Kelly, would like to come forward. The camera likes us on this side.
It was a pleasure to be here tonight, and a pleasure to work with LABC and the PAA, and as Dr. Gruber said, it's been a great relationship that continues to grow, and we look forward to keep going with the relationship next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We move on to open forum. This is the time in our agenda when, if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on a subject that's not on our agenda, they're welcome to do that now. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to personnel. Are you taking that, Julie? Okay.
I would like to present the following candidates for approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the candidates for employment?
So moved.
By Tom, second. By Stacy. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
For the leaves of absence, I would like to present the following leaves of absence for approval.
Do I have a motion to accept the, or approve the leaves of absence?
I'll make that motion.
By Rich, second.
Second.
By Todd. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
And for the additional staffing in your board packet, you would have received some additional information for 2 staff members. One is for speech and the other one is for community education person, and they're both being paid for by the additional students that are participating in those particular programs.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the additional staffing?
So moved.
By Tom, second. By Martha. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you. We have no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business, starting with our 2011-12 final audit report. Julie, if you want to introduce, I'll leave that up to you.
I have Dennis Hogeveen here from Clinton, Larson, Allen. They are our auditors. They've been auditing our district for 3 years now, I believe.
Maybe 4.
Might be 4. Before I started here, and we've been happy to work with them. They do an excellent job for our district, and Dennis will go through a slide summary for the board of our results of our audit.
Thank you very much, and I apologize in advance for the cold that I'm fighting here, but so if I accidentally cough or sneeze or something, I apologize, but it's great to be here with you. I want to thank Julie and all the talented people, and Michelle, of course, in the business office. Those probably run most of the interference with our audit team, but the entire finance team is just fantastic up here. So they're very, very pleasant to work with, and they're very conscientious about being very responsive to our audit team when they request it. Like 5 of us out here asking for things, and it's just developed into a very good working relationship. But we appreciate that very much, and I think we had noted we're about a month ahead of where we were last year. So it's a testament to the hard work of the business office to be able to move that up by a month. So the other thing I was going to mention is I think a couple weeks ago we met with the finance committee for around a good hour. You know, those are really good meetings because you can have a lot of good back and forth and discussion, and we don't have the time for that in this public setting. So I'm going to go through things fairly quickly, but I did want you to reemphasize the fact that we had met for close to it was like almost, we were butting right up against the next meeting, so it was a full hour. And so we appreciated the time that people could spend on that. I just want to remind people, if I can't have you read these from cover to cover, there's probably 150 pages up here, but the management's discussion and analysis section of the CAFR is probably the key thing. It's a good 10-minute read, but it's very insightful. Julie does a good job of picking out the key highlights. So again, I think this is going to be available on the district's website. So anybody in terms of the public that would be interested in the school finance and really wants just a quick, insightful read, pages 14 through 26 of the CAFR. And just mentioning, the district did upgrade to a CAFR. Is this the third year? So the CAFR is a comprehensive annual financial report. It really, truly is an indication that you're holding yourself as a district to a higher standard in financial reporting. People that, you know, in terms of bond ratings, love that kind of thing because there's a lot of great historical information here. It's a lot more work, don't get me wrong, but it does tell the public and you know, banking institutions, things like that, you're holding yourself to that higher standard. So we fully expect this is going to continue to qualify for the ASBO Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. And then the other report is a single audit report. That includes the student activity audit in that, under that cover. There's also a legal compliance opinion. There's lots of different things that as a school board you're hiring an auditing firm to do. First and foremost is the opinion on the audited financial statements, or the CAFR. But other than that, we have to, you know, go through our legal compliance work, our single audit because we spend more than $500,000, and then the student activity report as well. So just briefly wanted to walk through the outcomes of those different things. In terms of the CAFR, we're issuing a clean or an unqualified opinion on the financial statements. It's as good an opinion as we're able to give any school district, so that's definitely what you want to hear. In terms of internal control on the Yellow Book opinion, we didn't have any compliance issues to note. We did review with the Finance Committee 3 minor findings related to the internal controls, and those are certainly there for you to read, and I'd be glad to go over those in more detail if you have an interest in it, but I felt like we did cover that pretty thoroughly in that other meeting. So, in terms of the single audit, there were no findings. We did test the special ed cluster and the education jobs funding. And as I mentioned, there's a legal compliance aspect to our audit, and we didn't have any compliance issues. There's quite a large number of statutes that we're testing your compliance with. It's black or white. You either did it or you didn't do it. Very common to have some legal compliance exceptions, but your district did not. One thing that's not listed up there is the student activity report. Again, another opportunity to have findings with your student activity audit, and there were none for this year. So I should have included that up there as well. In terms of the financial outcomes, this is numbers get a little bit small, but in terms of, you know, if you just had one page to summarize the outcome of the audit for the year, this is how we find it probably most practical, because this is the entire general fund. It's made up of a lot of different attributes and components. Always want to bring your attention back up to that unsigned level up at the top. It's the, you know, board policy is I think 5% at a minimum. But that's the line up there. Everything else is sort of assigned to different things or reserved by state statute. You know, legislature is notorious about giving you funding, but then they tie a string to it and tell you have to spend it in a certain way. So the funds that you have programmatically available to you is that top line that I assigned. And even though it's a little bit small, but you started the year with a 1.9% unassigned fund balance, and you ended the year with a 6.8%. Ending fund balance is a percentage of the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the total expenditure. So very good outcomes in terms of those assigned categories. those are a statement of intent at a point in time. It doesn't really tie your hands that way, but I think it's a really good idea to tell the public what the purposes of the resources that you're accumulating. As a school board, it's your job to make those tough decisions and have that long-range view of the school's financial health. You know, you've been very clear these last 3 and 4 years about where you wanted to go to restore fiscal health, plan for the future in terms of ongoing growth and things like that. So when you're seeing an audit report like this, where things come out slightly better than what had been planned in terms of budget, it's a very good outcome. So the other thing that auditors are always interested in are budget to actual outcomes. At the bottom there, you can see you budgeted total revenues in your general fund of just over $64 million. They came in just under $65 million, so a variance of about $887,000. A positive variance in that revenues came in higher than the final amended budget, but it's just a 1.38% variance. So in terms of variance, is not that significant, but nonetheless positive, you know, that it came out slightly better. Total expenditures were budgeted at $62.5 million. They came in at just under $61 million, so a variance of $1.6 million on expenditures. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail as an additional slide comes up here. But for the general fund, very, very good outcomes. And the key aspect being the increase in the unassigned fund balance from 1.9 up to the 6.8%. Very good. In terms of the other fund outcomes, the food service fund had a good year. Fund balance increased from $390,000 to $405,000. The budget to actual outcomes were very good. Just really good indication of good planning and good fiscal health in your food service program. The community ed program, same thing. Revenues were $277,000, almost $278,000 higher than the final amended budget. But again, for community service, that's not an indication of additional taxes being collected from taxpayers. It's really just a sign of a very, very successful program. That the community ed is running programs that people want to participate. It's totally voluntary. If they participate, they pay the fee. So when revenues come in higher, he would expect expenditures to correspondingly do that, but they didn't in this case. Very good cost controls, but very good outcomes in terms of increasing the fund balance from $994 to $1.3 million. So good outcomes. The building fund, again, just the spending down of available fund balances, projects are completed. The debt service fund has two components, the operating fund and then the refunding bond portion. The refunding bonds are simply sitting in an escrow account waiting to refund some bonds in the future. And again, at significant savings to the district. So again, very insightful and good forethought in terms of doing what you can to reduce the impact on your taxpayers by refunding bonds at a lower interest rate. Very common right now, but a very good thing. In terms of the proprietary fund, you've got the OPEB revocable trust there and then the self-insurance accounts. That was new this year. And again, I think in terms of the general fund, one of the outcomes that allowed the expenditure there, the employee benefits to come in lower than budget, was the fact that the self-insurance turned out better than maybe had been initially planned. But again, that's very much in keeping with the long-range plan of keeping rates very stable by accumulating an available fund balance to make that happen. So very, very good outcomes. In terms of student enrollment, again, this doesn't reflect on the chart. I think that's up there, but one of the things we talked about at the finance committee meeting is that second line up there, open enrollment out, increased from 622 students, resident students opting out through open enrollment or through to charter schools. One of the things that came up in that meeting was how much of that 706 number from 2012 is representative of charter schools. That number is 340. The options, just regular options of resident students opting into other districts, public and districts, was 366. So the total was 706, but not very many outlying suburban districts have a charter school that's taking that kind of enrollment. But that's why we'll probably break that up for next year, just to kind of be able to track that and kind of keep our eye on what's happening with that. But by and large, it's been fairly constant. The gap, of open enrollment in versus out has expanded somewhat, but not what you would maybe expect in relationship to having a charter school in your boundaries. This is a 5-year trend of the general fund, and again, just kind of a historical frame of reference there. But again, just showing where you've been in 2008. You were at 0.94% in your unassigned fund balance, and to be able to go that up to 6.78 is a very, very good outcome. and very indicative of the tough decisions that the school board has to make in terms of making those outcomes possible. The revenue sources on slide 9. And again, there's more explanation in the executive audit summary. It gets a little bit hard to explain to the average citizen because of the way these numbers drift around. You can see from 2010 to 2011, there was some federal funding that was available on a one-time basis that they gave the money, federal money on one hand, they took the state away with the other hand, and then they do other things with tax shift. I think there's a $5 million shift from 2011 where they tell you to go ahead and advance recognize tax receipts that you've collected, but they take away that corresponding amount of state aid. So again, it really gives this distorted view that somehow taxpayers are being asked to foot a higher percentage of the bill, which nothing could be further from the truth. The only thing is that the legislature is telling you to go ahead and make a paper entry, and they'll keep their cash until after June 30th to balance the state's budget. The bad part about that kind of smoke and mirror type of thinking is they like to take credit for it. Now when the state's economy is improving and they're starting to buy down that shift, they like to take credit for all this money going back into education, when in reality all they're doing is returning all the cash they had sucked away from you in the first place. So it's very interesting how they like to get it coming and going. But this was also an interesting one that we had a good discussion regarding at the Finance Committee meeting, because you don't often see the expenditure per student in the general fund go down like this. Again, you were the beneficiary, I think, of some key retirements and things like that. There's in the MD&A section, as I mentioned earlier, there's a really good narrative that kind of accompanies that and explains how things like that can happen. If you have, high cost employees that are retiring and they're replaced with lower cost teachers, you're still, that's how you can have outcomes like that. But well beyond that, just the retirements, there was a lot of other very key, planned, deliberate actions by the school board to make those outcomes possible. So it just kind of jumps out at you when you see a graph like that, the kind of decisions that you're making as a board. I like this graph, excuse me, because it takes the entire general fund of the district and breaks it down into these categories of salaries, benefits, purchase services, et cetera. And so, again, you're most interested perhaps in the salaries and benefits line, but on a net basis, not that significant in terms of variances. It's just kind of interesting data there. In terms of timing, things that cause timing differences related to capital expenditures, for example, or the fact that you allow carryover, at a site so that you don't have a use it or lose it mentality. Very common to see some expenditures sometimes coming in certain categories underneath the final amended budget. This is a 5-year trend of the food service fund. Nothing really jumped out at you. We do do a calculation of the revenue per lunch served. That's not what you're charging for lunches. That's just a metric to kind of get a sense for what the changes are from one year to the next in terms of what you might be charging for meals. But just an interesting way of looking at things and how many meals you're serving to students. Then what we do is further break it down between how many kids are getting reduced price meals, free meals, and full price meals. So again, your trends are very much in keeping with what we're seeing in other school districts in terms of the percentage of kids getting free meals is going up, and that's very common. This is a 5-year trend of the community service fund operations, and again, very positive outcomes in terms of the available fund balance being built up to where it's at June 30, 2012. But nothing more than that, I guess, to really point out. But those are the key things I wanted to quickly go through with you. We certainly appreciate all the time and effort that the business office puts into that. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have for me at this point.
Are there any questions from the board?
Sure, I'll have one. You mentioned earlier there were 3 audit findings that were minor, but in the page 1 of the executive summary, you mentioned 2 that were considered material weaknesses and 1 considered significant deficiency.
Yeah, and those
now, I'm not too skilled at going through. Can you go through those
Sure.
audit findings for me, please?
If we turn to the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, one of them
On what page?
I'm on page 8 of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. And again, on page 8, just to kind of reduce, on page 8 are you in that?
Of the thick one or the skinny
not
one?
too thick. It's schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Because you have a CAFR, we pull all of the reports that the ASBO programs are not interested in into a separate report. So it's called Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Works. Do you have
Did not
a copy of
receive that, did we? No.
So we'll get you that. If not, I thought everybody had a hard copy of the reports, but perhaps those did not get routed. Okay. So I'll just talk you through it, and then if you have questions after tonight, I'll just kind of briefly mention them, and if you want to have a further discussion, I'd be glad to do that with you. The first one is on page 8 of that report, and it's when part of your internal control structure as a school board is to rely on an outside auditor to help draft a GAAP-compliant financial statement. It's very common to have a internal control issue that says, ideally, you'd have that capability internally to draft this report, not rely on us to help do that. So that, again, I'm saying that's minor because it's so common for auditors to help draft the financial statements. But I think, and we've talked about this for next year, we think we can eliminate that. It's going to require more effort on the business office, but we can walk through the steps that would have to be done to eliminate that. Because I think now that you've upgraded to a CAFR, I think we know that our goal would be to eliminate as many of these findings as possible. The other one was a prior period adjustment. There was a refunding bond issue last year that did not get reflected in the financial statements. So, and again, professional standards require us to report that as a finding. And again, because that's off the books and it's not running through the district's financial statements, it's sitting over in an escrow account downtown waiting to refund some bonds. Yes, it's an issue that it wasn't there, but in the big scheme of things, it really was not something that was coming through the district's books and not being reflected in the financial statements, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And then
The significant one?
the significant one, I think, was the two material weaknesses. The material weakness is actually more significant than the significant deficiency. So even though the wording is odd, we're required to use certain words. So in the big scheme of things, material is more important or more, what's the word? It's
So we want to be more watchful of.
yeah, so significant deficiency is less. It's a lesser finding than a material weakness. So there's one time card lacking approval.
Oh, okay.
So those were the three things that were referenced. But so the wording, sometimes I don't like to spend time talking about them in this kind of a setting, just because, for that reason, is that the words sound worse than they are. So, and like I said, we did talk about those at length at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. So, anything else?
Any other questions?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This needs approval. Do I have a motion to approve the final audit report for 2011-12?
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
I'll second that
By
motion.
Rich. Any further comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to technology phase 2 proposal. Marcus?
Members of the board, Dr. Gruber, good evening. My name is Marcus Milazzo. I'm the District Technology Coordinator for Prior Lake Savage Chamber Schools. I'm here tonight to give you a very brief update on phase 1 of the Information Technology Plan and also seek approval for phase 2 of that plan. The Information Technology Plan had 3 components: staff workstations, district wireless infrastructure, and a data warehouse. Back in the spring, we sought out board approval for phase 1 of that project. At the time, we were asked to not to exceed $600,000, and we broke the proposal into 2 phases. Phase 1, excuse me, consisted of 950 desktop computers, 700 for staff, 250 for pod labs at the high school. We were able to leverage a lease, a 3-year lease through HP, and those computers were deployed and configured and up and running before back-to-school workshop. We also, during the summer, implemented a wireless infrastructure at the Prior Lake High School and the 2 middle schools. That we leveraged a Meraki access point. The Merakis do a couple things for us. They are web-based and web-controlled, so the controller is in the cloud, which allows us to access the Meraki dashboard from any computer that has internet access. It also has an embedded MDM, and an MDM is a mobile device management solution. So we are able to configure our iPads or iOS devices or Android devices utilizing and leveraging the Meraki access point. So we can manage our influx of iOS and Android devices through the cloud. It's extremely handy. So we were able to get that wireless infrastructure up and running at both the high school and the 2 middle schools before back-to-school workshop. We have a district-owned, what we call a district-owned wireless access that is for school district devices only. And then we also have a guest network that is available to everybody. And it also helps and allows students to leverage the bring your own device to school. And that is a big push that we are allowing. Not only we have social media policies in place, board policies in place to allow for bring your own device. One of the essential conditions in order for students to bring their own devices was to provide a wireless access. So we are doing that at the high school and the 2 middle schools currently. The third component of phase 1 was to research and pilot a data warehouse. That charge is now in the hands of the Professional Development Committee. That committee will be reviewing multiple products at the end of this month. We're going to be contacting a number of vendors to come in and do presentations on a data warehouse and all the components that are contained within a data warehouse. We want our data warehouse to be a repository for all student data, and we want that to be able to be a repository E through 12. You see the cost of the phase 1 on that screen. Proud to say that we delivered all the components of phase 1 on time and under budget. This wireless infrastructure, this slide references phase 2, which we'll be seeking for board approval tonight. And these are the current costs of what it would be to have a Meraki wireless access points not only installed but configured at each of the elementaries. In regards to the data warehouse, is when the Professional Development Committee is looking at various vendors, we will have more than just these 3 listed here, but these are some examples and give you some ballpark figures on what a data warehouse would would cost, not only to acquire, but then annual ongoing licensing fees as well. These are ballpark figures. They're not final quotes. We are going to be reaching out to around 6 vendors to be able to showcase their product. Along with that, we're also asking vendors to showcase a student information system as well to the Professional Development Committee. We see that as an important piece because the data warehouse needs to be able to speak, and the information needs to flow from the data warehouse into our student information system and vice versa. So the Professional Development Committee will also be looking at student information systems in conjunction with the data warehouse. Our goal is to have a data warehouse up and running by the next school year, by the fall of next year, pending board approval. So here are the recommendations for phase 2. Implement a wireless infrastructure project at the elementary levels. We feel it's important to round out that project to provide that essential condition E12. The Professional Development Committee will be completing the research of the data warehouse and making a recommendation as we move forward so that we're ready to go by the fall of 2013. And you can see the associated costs right below. So at this time, we're asking for approval for phase 2 of our information technology project. Are there any questions for me?
Martha?
I'm curious to know, Bridges ALC is not on this list at all, and I know it's a leased facility and we don't know how long we'll occupy that area. But can you tell me what type of computer equipment they have there?
They have older equipment, and we are currently looking at repurposing computers to the ALC. We're also looking at upgrading their camera system and maybe doing a side project with the wireless infrastructure. They do have a wireless infrastructure, but it's not the Meraki system that we put into place. It makes it a little bit difficult being a lease space, how much equipment we do put into it. But part of the project is, as we went and replaced the 700 district workstations, the classroom workstations, where we were able to repurpose a lot of those computers. And part of the focus was the elementaries. The elementaries were very short on lab space. So what we've done is repurposed a lot of those computers to the elementaries to try to round out so each elementary has a second computer lab within the building. I have been in contact with the director out at the LC, and we're trying to find some creative ways to update and expand their computers as well.
Would putting something in this budget be appropriate for that or not?
I'll defer.
Okay.
Is it something that the board hasn't discussed at this time, but it's something definitely that's on our radar for the future, that we look at that space and decide as we go through the goal task force committee and make some decisions about where that placement of the ALC will be for the future, then we will make some decisions regarding technology in that space.
Okay, I was wondering if there was some temporary, like iPads or something that would be mobile that they would take with them to another location if that was.
I know that I have been working with Dave, and he has sought out, and he's looking for a lot of grants and grant opportunities right now, and we've helped him with pricing, and like I said, we're also trying to identify computers we can repurpose out there. We're trying to get their camera system into our new VTI system, that or a system provided by VTI. So we are working with the LC. I know that they have a brand new room, and we've provided quotes for them for smartboard equipment as well. So I'm working with Dave.
Okay.
Any other questions? I have a question. Marcus, you mentioned the student info services and the data warehouse. Could you explain the difference? Because I thought the student information services was the data warehouse.
Some student information systems contain a data warehouse. Others are separate products. A data warehouse will be a repository for all of our student data. A student information system will be a teacher grade book and a parent portal. And then the two products, I'm sorry,
And
attendance and grades and parent portal. So demographics, health. Some student information systems contain a point of sale lunch program. But a lot of districts will use a third-party service for or software for that. So they are very similar, and but they need to talk to each other, and the flow of information needs to come in and out of both products. So
Okay, so we need both.
yes, we currently have a student information system, which is Skyward, and we are giving our legacy or company an opportunity to present their data warehouse as
Okay.
well.
So it's potential we could keep what we have and add to it with the data warehouse, or we could look at both systems together to see if that's something that would improve upon our current student information system.
Martha?
One last question. With the leased equipment, what's the deemed useful life, or how often does that turn over?
It's a 3-year lease
3-year, okay.
with an opportunity to buy back some of the equipment or all the equipment after the end of the lease.
Okay, and is the elementary installation, is that pretty much a firm number on
Yes.
here? And it's an estimate on the data warehouse, I take it?
Correct.
So is that a high estimate or a low estimate? I'm not sure exactly what we'll be
It's the
approving
middle
here
ground.
tonight. Okay, if it goes over that, will you be coming back to the board?
We would
Is that what you're
definitely bring it back
asking
to the
for?
board. But we wanted to be able to move forward on those projects. If it is more than that, we would definitely come back to you once a decision has been proposed to the board as to which direction they'd like to go with those programs.
Okay. Mike?
Those are all funds that are going to be spent in next fiscal year too, right?
The money for this will be in this fiscal year and be in the final budget for the December board
Okay.
meeting. The data warehouse, we would look at implementing over the summer, so very possible that first implementation would be in this fiscal
Okay.
year.
So you're asking us to amend this year's budget
Right.
by approving this?
By
Okay.
approving it, and it would be included for the final budget in December.
Okay.
Any other questions? I just have one comment. Sure.
On the student information system, we're already spending dollars for our student information systems. So this is just a logical step to make sure we have the right student information system and the best as we move forward with the data warehouse. We don't want to have, for instance, an out-of-date student information system with a wonderful new data warehouse that they don't talk to each other. So it just made sense to do them both at the same time, knowing very well that we could stay with Skyward and go with their data warehouse or any combination of other options.
So Skyward will be a vendor that you will contact?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have an opportunity to present the product, yes.
Okay, are there any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the technology proposal?
So moved.
By Stacy, second.
I'll second it.
By Mike. Any other comments?
I guess I don't feel comfortable at this time on the voting for this as motioned. I've heard ever since I came onto the board how essential this data warehouse is, and I'm not seeing any requirements matrix on these requirements are important to us. This vendor fits that. I'm also a little bit taken aback by the wide range of yearly ongoing costs, the $20,000 to $40,000 estimate that you have. And I guess if it were me, I would like to see that portion of the recommendation removed and have Marcus come back at a later time once they've gone through their selection matrix and present and then approve that when they're ready. So as
In last spring, when we were going through the final budget, all this information was presented to the board as far as what we could do, and the board decided to just go with this phase one and the rest of it. So all of this is something that we presented already to the board as prior projects. And so what we're asking for in that range is something that we definitely have, we won't make a decision until the spring, but allows us to look at that option for them. You know,
But as
for
presented, this gives you this wide bandwidth, and we have no idea who you're choosing as a vendor right now.
We would still come back to the board for final approval of those vendors.
And for the cost to approve the purchase of that?
That would be included as part of that approval.
So the matrix that you're asking for, Rich, will come back as a part of their study as before an approval, final approval. What you're giving them is just a window to say, go ahead and look at these options. The final approval comes back to the school board for a vote at the end.
Well, this, as you said, this was discussed before. We knew this was coming.
I know it's
My
coming.
understanding is that this just process has moved up a little bit.
It is, and what we'd like to do, like I said, is included in the budget, at least some dollars in the budget, so if the board does go ahead and approve it in the spring, that we have the money allocated in the budget for that purpose.
In the 13-14 budget.
For the
12,
13 budget, current year budget.
Yeah, I know it's coming, I guess this stuff is going to be very important to the district. It's how we're going to do business for the next couple of years, how everyone's going to see us, and how the interaction on the website. So I guess I'd like to see it contingent, the motion approved contingent, that they have to come back for final approval for the data warehouse. They said they are, but as the motion is made.
Rich, that's why I asked the question I did earlier, because we have to make final approval of our budget in December. And so, because I think we're expecting to spend this money, and we can't come back in the spring after this year's budget is locked down, if you will. At that point, it would be a variance to the budget. So that's why I asked specifically in what year we were planning to spend this. I'm looking at this as sort of it's a not to exceed, but they still have to come back and sort of say, here's what we spent of, you said we could go up to 60,000, here's where we came back, if you will. So, I fully expect that they're going to have to come back to the board this spring and say, here's the process we went through, here were the vendors that we looked at, here's the one that we're recommending, and it's, at or below what the board back in the fall proposed. I agree with your statement that if they were going to be coming back for the 2013-14 school year, that we shouldn't be approving this right now, but I don't believe that that's the expectation.
And it'll be very similar to the costing that we did with the computers last spring and summer into June, is that the committee brought back a proposal. You asked for more clarification. They went back and did more homework. They came back to you with a second refined proposal, and then they went back again. So it's not they bring it forward and you approve it. They bring it forward for your discussion. It comes through a study session to a full board meeting, and then a decision will be made when the time is right, with the matrix, with everything completed. But at this point, they don't have the matrix completed because they haven't had the vendors in and they haven't started the bid.
Because as I hear the motion, I see a blank check, motion-wise. They want so much to spend. Am I,
No, really what they're asking us to do is to approve a change in the budget that would basically be a placeholder for up to 60,000. The board will still have to approve that expenditure whenever it comes back this spring. So really, I think that's maybe the missing part of this, is they're asking us to basically alter the budget for 2012, 2013, not necessarily to commit to spending that money right now.
okay. If that's the way it is, then, okay.
Are there any other comments or questions, clarifications? Okay, I think I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And we do appreciate getting all of that done on time and under budget before. We'll move on now to the long-term facility needs presentation by Nexus. And Julie, you'll be introducing.
We have Nexus Solutions here from Champlin, Minnesota. They are here to discuss our comprehensive facilities improvement plan for first reading tonight. This is really just a discussion tonight. It is not for board approval at this time. I have Brent Jones and Mike David here to talk about what we've gone through so far, what the plans are, how we plan to fund these projects, and so they are here to go through this slideshow. And if you have questions, they'll have time at the end.
Thank you for giving us some time this evening. We're excited to be here. A quick clerical note, though. We have the presentation that is on your laptops is going to be different from the one that's on the big screen here. So we apologize for that, but this is the one that you'll want to pay attention to. We're very excited to have the opportunity to share with you the plan. We've been at it now for about 3.5 months, and there's been a tremendous amount of work that's been done. Kudos, big thank you to Jim and his staff, the administrative team, as well as the board members, especially those on the facilities committee. You all have spent a lot of time. You've rolled up your shirt sleeves. We still have a ways to go, but again, I believe in the last 3 months or so, we've made tremendous progress. Things that we want to share with you tonight to just ground everybody on what the district's intent or the mission statement was in terms of what we set out to achieve. Touch briefly on our process and where we are progress-wise. We'll spend most of our time talking about the findings and what we have for improvement summaries. We will talk about we'll do a little analysis of the budget, and then we'll close with the timeline and leave time for questions and answers. To begin with, when we started the process, we co-authored a mission statement, which in essence says the goal was to develop a comprehensive long-range facilities plan that creates quality learning environments for all Prior Lake Savage area students and is completed in a fiscally responsible manner. So it shouldn't matter what grade you're in or what school you happen to attend. You ought to have an equal quality learning environment. Likewise, the board has emphasized to us, I guess it started with the administration and then the board followed up by saying that we need to do this in a very fiscally responsible manner. We're very proud of the fact that we've come up with a fairly innovative financial plan that we will be able to accomplish that. The process that we established is we really boiled it down to 3 main phases. We start with the assessment phase, which started with a detailed facilities assessment. We looked at the capacity of the facilities, how they were organized. We are actually still waiting on the demographic study, but that's going to play into a couple of the final solutions here over the next month or two. We looked at your public opinion survey, and kudos to the district. You've done a tremendous job of earning the public's trust. And then we also developed preliminary financial solutions, which are still ongoing. We then moved into what we call the review and revise phase, and this is where the administrative team and the facilities committee spent a lot of their time digging into the specifics of the plan, looking at what should be included. We prioritized things on a 1, 2, 3 basis, and the plan included all of the priority 1s and 2s. We've got advice from the district's financial advisor, and then I believe 2 weeks from tonight, we are seeking community input. From there, we'll move into the approval and implementation plan. Obviously starts with board action. We follow that by securing funding, and then we move immediately into design so that we can begin construction in the summer of 2013. So how detailed was the assessment? All 11 facilities were analyzed. There were 26 different analysts from 13 separate agencies that invested over 1,500 man-hours. So that was and most of that work was done between July and September. They developed cumulatively a 600-page report, which Jim and his staff have went through page by page several times. So they have it was a very, very detailed report. All the improvements were identified. So all of the major capital improvements that could be seen as needed over the next 10 years. And again, these were all reviewed thoroughly with both the administrative team as well as the facilities committee. What work did those groups do? A lot of facility studies are done, in cubicles or off of plans. This study was done very hands-on. So the analysts actually went out into the facilities. They physically measured equipment to determine, physically inspected it. All of the teaching staff through an online survey had the opportunity to weigh in. All of the principals were personally interviewed. Health and safety reports, the Department of Education has a very rigorous evaluation process for any types of health and safety types of improvements, of ventilation, fire code improvements, things of that nature. Those have all been completed and submitted. We obviously drafted the scopes, developed budgets, spent time doing an operational expense audit. So we looked at what does the district spend on outside purchase goods and services, and look for ways of how could we spend that money more efficiently. Your staff does a tremendous job. They're very frugal, but we still did find some ways that to wring out some more bucks out of the budget. We calculated savings, both utility and operational, used those to develop our preliminary financial solutions. Then we began the in-depth meetings with the administrative team and ultimately, again, with the facilities committee, who, again, had several multiple hours. I think one meeting went to 3.5 hours when they really dug into all the details. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brent, who's going to walk us through some of the technical specifics, and then we'll come back to the financials.
Thanks, Mike. As we mentioned, we began our process by conducting interviews of each of the principals and then conducting an online staff survey. And we did get it was online via the email system. We did get 277 responses. The staff was asked to evaluate their individual workspaces. So in terms of their perception of indoor air quality, ventilation rates, comfort levels, noise, natural lighting, things of that nature. And what we found is the primary drivers here that the comfort levels varied greatly throughout the district. Definitely did not hit the 80 percentile satisfaction rate that we like to see in buildings. So that gave our auditors something to focus upon when they went through each of your buildings. In the terms of noise and lighting levels and things of that nature, you did score very well. We also then looked at an individual building by building basis and kind of compared buildings to one another. And then again, we did find quite a bit of variability. And it didn't really matter if it was a new building or an old building. There was quite a bit of variance in the staff comfort levels. So that's again, our mechanical engineers took special interest in when evaluating your buildings. About 90 respondents also gave us comments. And the comments were wide-ranging. A few of them are on the screen here. Some of the negatives, if you will, were, when my classroom is too warm, the students get lethargic and it's hard for them to stay on task. To, I'm in many rooms throughout the day. I always dress in layers because every room is quite different in temperature. And then there was also, some people took time to give some positive kudos to Jim and the staff. I'm very fortunate to have a nice area and responsive maintenance team to help when things occasionally get out of balance. So, again, many thanks to the staff taking time to fill out that survey and help guide us in our audit. The audit team then, as Mike mentioned, spent the next month and a half going through each of your facilities, generated over nearly 700 different individual projects throughout your 11 facilities, project sizes ranging from about $1,000 up to several $1 million. We put those into a spreadsheet that the facilities committee has gone through line item by line item. For tonight's summary purposes, we've grouped them in the following categories. First off is what we call a performance contract. These are projects that are self-funding, i.e. that they generate savings, and those savings actually pay for the improvements themselves. Safe schools projects, which is pretty self-explanatory. Health and safety projects, which deal with the safety of building occupants and the health and ventilation rates of individual buildings. Deferred maintenance needs, architectural improvements, and lastly, athletic needs throughout the district. We had those nearly 700 line items. As Mike mentioned, we then pared them down through an iterative process going through with the facilities committee and the district maintenance staff. What I'm sharing with you tonight are those projects that are deemed immediate needs or within the next 5 years. Projects need to be addressed in the next 5 years. So, performance contract, that right now is looking at about $3.1 million worth of needs. Projects include everything from improving your lighting system efficiencies to the use of your water in your buildings, reducing the flow rates of individual fixtures throughout your buildings, improving your fan and pumping systems to basically throttle them and meter the energy use of those based on need of the building. Looking at the pools in your 2 middle schools, they're very energy intensive, and we have some great ideas on how to reduce the energy consumption and the maintenance needs of those individual systems. We looked at backup generators at Jeffers Pond and Red Tail Ridge, along with power factor correction. Those 2 sites, along with your high school, are on a different utility than the rest of your buildings, and so they give you a financial incentive to make some specific electrical improvements at those sites. And then lastly, we looked at a print management software with Marcus in the technology team here, software system that helps reduce your printing costs district-wide. So the benefits of a performance contract, really, once again, are they're self-funding. They pay for themselves over time. They reduce your ongoing utility expenditures and reduce your carbon footprint, and also have a positive impact on your operations and maintenance expenditures on an annual basis. Safe school projects, after the prioritization has taken place, we're down to about $823,000 worth of needs throughout the district. Safe school projects we summed up primarily in creating a secure main entrances to each of your schools. Now, your newer schools have it such that any visitors, all doors are locked around the perimeter of the building. Only the front main entrance is open, and then the visitor has to go into the entry vestibule, and they're forced to go into the office. So they're seen by district staff. They need to sign in, and then we know that there's a visitor. Some of your older sites do not have that luxury. You can literally walk in through the vestibule and go enter the building without being seen. So buildings like Hidden Oaks and some of your older elementaries will want to make some improvements and make sure that each building is as safe as your new schools. We want to expand the use of a card access. All your buildings have some sort of card access right now, but working with your principals, there are additional doors that we want to electrify and put card readers on. We want to expand the use of security camera systems. At the high school right now, it's kind of got your standard in place. It's an IP-based security system, and we're working with Marcus and his staff. We want to make sure we take and replicate that throughout the district. Again, the benefits of safe school projects obviously are enhanced protection of your building occupants and then reducing the potential for any theft or vandalism in your buildings. Health and safety projects currently are identified at about $13.7 million throughout the district. These improvements correct any electrical or OSHA identified hazards that we may have, correcting any code violations or changes in codes that we need to keep abreast of. We want to update any outdated fire alarm equipment throughout the district. Increase the ventilation rates in your schools. Primarily your 2 middle schools were the biggest drivers here. Some of your older elementaries have already been addressed, and your new schools have great ventilation rates. But your middle schools have a lot of, I should say quite a bit of ventilation work that needs to be addressed throughout this program. And then lastly, asbestos abatement as necessary. We're not going to, if there's asbestos that's contained now, we're not going to take it out just to spend money, if you will. It's only we want to make sure we plan for asbestos abatement that is kind of a secondary need as part of this other work. So if you're going in and doing ventilation work and you have to take down ceiling tile that may have asbestos mastic to it, or you have to replace hot water piping that has asbestos insulation, we want to make sure that we plan for that and budget for it accordingly. The health and safety projects produce a better indoor quality for all your building occupants. We will provide increased filtration rates of all the ventilation systems, reduce the potential for mold in your buildings by controlling space humidity, and finally, greatly improve the occupant comfort throughout your building. And that goes back to those original graphs that we showed you. For maintenance projects, right now budgeted at $16.9 million. These are wide-ranging throughout. Each building has different needs here. Obviously, your older buildings have more deferred maintenance needs than your newer buildings. Roofing needs at this building, Twin Oaks and Greenwood. You have major masonry needs at Five Hawks, the DSC, and Westwood. Flooring, we looked at flooring systems, new ceilings, paint in all your older schools. Boiler plant replacements at at your older sites, getting rid of steam and going to hot water, and really renewing your infrastructure and your central plants for another 40 years. We also looked at your site. We didn't just limit our analysis just to buildings. We looked at your parking lots, your sidewalks, your retaining walls, things of that nature, and those are part of this program, as well as any doors, windows, lockers, casework, things of that nature that have worn out throughout your facilities. So, what this really does is it addresses the current maintenance needs that you have to deal with at kind of a firefighting mode standpoint. We're really trying to identify what you need to spend in the next 5 years and put together a funding plan to address deferred maintenance. It refreshes all your learning environments, and especially in the case of your central plants, we can reduce your utility expenditures and maintenance expenditures by replacing some of these older systems. Architectural improvements, these are still being studied. Mike mentioned we're still waiting the results of your demographic analysis. One of the architectural improvements we're looking at is in addition to the high school. Right now, we've got it budgeted in there for about a 225 student addition. But again, the reconvening of the growth task force in the next few months and the demographic data will really help us identify what that addition needs to be. We also, at the high school, want to address the cafeteria and serving area constraints and make that space work better for the existing enrollment. At the high school, we want to create a vestibule where all the kids come off the bus and enter the building. We want to expand the activities office and add a second elevator. Outside the high school, each building has some, I would call, more minor needs, if you will, from an architectural and reconfiguration standpoint. Twin Oaks, we're looking at additional science room and additional computer lab. Hidden Oaks, we're looking at a few different projects, the largest of which are a cafeteria expansion and reconfiguring how the bus drop and the parent drop-off works at that site. It's really tight right now, and as if anyone's been there in the morning, you can tell traffic flow is a real issue there, and we think we can improve upon that. Rainwood, we're looking at creating another entrance that really leads from the playground directly into the cafeteria area to help the flow of that building and keep students from having to travel throughout the entire building as they come in for lunch. And then at Five Hawks, we're looking at to enclose the media center classrooms there. So benefits are to really alleviate the overcrowding at the high school that we have right now. And using the demographic analysis, we want to take care of the short-term overcrowding needs there. We want to make sure we plan for future growth. So any money that we spend now is spent wisely and is spent that we can expand it in the future if enrollment in the district does continue to grow. We want to ensure all students have access to the proper number of labs, and again, we want to improve the quality of all the learning environments throughout the district. As Mike mentioned, we want your older buildings to be brought up to on par with your new buildings. And then lastly, athletic field projects. We're looking at resurfacing the track at Dan Patch Stadium. We're looking at replacing the track at Laker Field. That's a competition track right now. It does not, when we replace it, we'll go to more of a Phi-Ed, a 4-lane Phi-Ed track there, and then resurfacing the high school tennis courts. The district is going to, over the next few months, going to consider and evaluate the synthetic turf with the growth of soccer programs and lacrosse programs. The wear and tear on turf, on grass fields really takes a toll. And working with your local youth organizations, we want to evaluate some options there, maybe adding 1 or 2 synthetic turf fields in your district. So again, benefits here, we want to improve the safety of all your playing surfaces and work with your youth organizations to give you better fields. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Those of you who weren't adding up as we went through, the grand total of the capital improvements that the board is currently considering is about $48 million. That is in 2013 dollars. As you can see from this list, which is done obviously on a per school basis, there's 4 projects that really comprise a large percentage of that, and they happen to be mostly your older buildings, being Greenwood Elementary, Twin Oaks and Hidden Oaks middle schools, and then the high school, which obviously is one of your newer buildings, but that is largely because of the potential addition there. When we break that down by category, we see that again there's 3 large categories that make up the lion's share of the work. The first is the health and safety upgrades. Those are again largely code compliance type issues, ventilation projects, and that is largely funded with the health and safety levy that public school districts in Minnesota have access to. Then we have the deferred maintenance projects. Again, as Brett mentioned, those are your big ticket capital items, being roofing projects, masonry projects, parking lots, things of that nature. Those are all things that are required just in your older buildings. They're designed to extend the life of the existing buildings. That work would largely be funded by kind of restructuring the existing deferred maintenance levy, as well as the capital funds. So again, we would be able to do the lion's share of that work without having to go to referendum as well. And then the last large piece there is the architectural improvements, which again, the major components of that would be a potential building addition at the high school, which again, those are items that need some further vetting yet. Obviously, we need folks like the growth task force to weigh in. But again, having personally toured the high school, a person does not spend too much time in there. It's literally difficult to find an open seat during the day. That building is full. We also broke down the potential improvements on a kind of normalized them to look for basically intensity. And to no surprise, again, you see that normalized on a $1 per square foot basis, your buildings with the most intense needs are, again, happen to be the older buildings, being Twin Oaks, Greenwood, Hidden Oaks, and Five Hawks. And then you also have the high school in there. The district service center here, the actual dollar amount is not all that great, but just because of the size of the building and the work that needs to be done in redesigning the roof structure is what drives that cost of it. But again, the actual dollar amount is not all that great. You see on the far right side, you have your newer facilities, and as expected, the investment there is quite a bit smaller. As we mentioned briefly, the way that the project would largely be funded is through utilizing existing budget dollars, and then as well as the health and safety or alternative facilities bonding and levy program. By also taking advantage of the low interest rates, the extremely low interest rates that schools have access to today, we can restructure your existing debt. And what we did is kind of compared how does your school district stack up to your neighbors. And a couple interesting things fall out here is Brent and I have worked in countless communities across the state of Minnesota, and we have yet to meet the community that doesn't think that their taxes are too high, myself included. However, when you actually look at Prior Lake next to all your neighboring communities, you are literally exactly at average, and this is one place where you like to be below average. So you're not doing too bad. The good news here is we can literally accomplish nearly all of the capital improvements and keep you at that average just by restructuring existing debt, taking advantage of expiring debt as well as lower interest rates, and we're able to get most of the improvements done without causing a tax rate increase, which that was one of the kind of the hard lines that the board had drawn for us. Was we want to see our tax rate go down. Obviously, with this amount of work, we can hold that rate flat for a few years, but then eventually it'll definitely go down. Okay. So again, some good news there in terms of, and I think that's kudos again to the board as well as the administration for how they've managed the finances in the years leading up to this project. Looking at our process, we've been at it as we mentioned since about the middle of July. So approaching 4 months. Time flies when you're having fun. And we are right now kind of coming to the tail end of the review and revise portion or phase, excuse me. You see that we're in the shaded phase there. We have another meeting, the third review meeting with Facilities Committee this Wednesday. 2 weeks from tonight, we are having a kind of a town hall meeting, inviting the community to come in and see the details of the plan, and we welcome their feedback, and we would obviously take that into consideration as the plan moves forward. The plan right now, or at least portions of it, are scheduled to go to an official first reading in the latter half of November on the 26th. That would be followed by approval at the December 10th meeting, which is also the same meeting where the board needs to do the final levy certification. The items that would be approved that night, again, are those items that would either be subject to levy approval for the coming year, or those items that the board would want to move forward with for construction in the summer of 2013. Okay, so items that would probably, or that may not be on that, or may not be approved that night, would be things like potential high school addition, potential fields, things of that nature, which probably, again, warrant some additional discussion. Following that, following the approvals, assuming that the board decides to go forward, on the 10th, we would immediately develop a plan implementation schedule, which would be followed by immediately commencing design for the summer of 2013 projects. We want to be bidding those in the March timeframe, and then to give contractors time enough to order equipment, which has, can have some lead times in excess of 2 and 3 months. We'd be staging in May, and then doing our heavy construction and starting in summer 2013. That would continue through the summer of 2014. Need to emphasize when we talk about starting the work in mid-May, we would not be disrupting the learning environment. Obviously, safety is a huge concern, but we would just be staging all of our equipment and that sort of things, so that when the students are out, the contractors can literally begin work the next day. What does the plan accomplish? Really, it's very complete. Okay, we identify all of the major capital needs. They're identified, prioritized, and funded. Okay, over the next 10 years. We've what we called right-sized the technology budget. We worked with Marcus in terms of what he saw the needs as. We then went to a third-party consultant and had those verified, which again, kudos to Marcus. He was very conservative. We also compared your technology spending again to some other Twin City suburbs, and what we found is that you do an excellent job with technology, but again, you're on the lower end of spending. Okay, so again, kudos to the district there. We improved efficiency of the district. We do the entire plan without taking any money from the classrooms. We had a goal of trying to be able to direct money toward the classrooms because of the amount of work that needs to be done. We weren't able to push money into the classrooms, but we can do it without taking any money from the classrooms. So that's still an admirable goal. We can address all the building needs without a referendum. And again, as I mentioned, the tax rate stays flat, so your local community wouldn't see an increase. That brings us back to our discussion items. We talked about the intent, our process and progress, what we found, what the potential improvements are, what the budgets look like, and where we are timeline-wise. With that, we'd ask for questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Tom?
With the all the different pools of money, if you want to call it that, that we can hopefully use if everything works out. What about the surprises that come up? Because there's always in 2 years something has to get replaced. We don't have an option.
Yep.
Is there still options for being able to fund that, or are we using all our resources for just what is on this list?
No, it's a great question. The team spent a lot of time on it in terms of coming up with a plan that was complete, but at the same time it didn't screw everything down so tight that you weren't able to cover the inevitable surprise. No, we in the safe schools budgets, the deferred maintenance budget, as well as the capital budget, right now we have got earmarked only anywhere from 15 to 25% of those budgets. So that means 75 to 85% of the budget remains unearmarked, so that could still be used for ongoing expenses. Plus, we should be eliminating or at least minimizing most of the fires, and we want to get the maintenance crew into kind of a fire prevention mode as opposed to a firefighting mode. But again, there still is flexibility going forward. Furthermore, because of the district's debt structure, once we get to, depending on the final financial plan, once we get about 7 years or so, 8 years out, the district's tax rate drops off dramatically. And for those items that are out 8 to 10 years, that might be a potential time for a referendum in terms of some of the bigger ticket capital items down the road.
Any other questions? Okay. We as a board have been going through this with you a number of times and asked many questions, myself included. So I think we'll be anxious to go through it again on Wednesday, and then as a reminder to the public, the presentation will be presented on November 19th at 7 o'clock here, I believe. Right. Yep. So we spread the word, people to come and see what we're doing. And with that, Sue-Ann, did you have anything else to add?
Just to reiterate that any changes at the high school would be coming not this year, but would be coming in the following year, 13-14. We need to do some more of our due diligence as far as the demographic study, the growth task force, recommendations brought to the school board, and then decisions made by the board as we move forward. So that one is just on the study plan, is not something that's going to be happening in the coming year.
Okay.
One
Thank
other
you.
item.
Oh.
For the 19th, I talked to Christy about this. It'd be nice if we could have, because we will stream that video, right?
We are working on that as we
Okay.
speak.
Because it'd be nice to have some real-time Twitter, or tweeting, and/or have people at home email a question that can be answered for those who can't attend.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to organizational charts. Sue-Ann?
Yes, in your packet, you will see the 2012-13 organizational charts. We do this every year. These boxes do not refer to people. They do refer to functions that are completed underneath the different administrators out in each department. So it hasn't changed tremendously this year, but it is something that on an annual basis we ask you to review and consider.
We do have a motion to approve the organizational charts for 2012-13.
So moved.
By Todd, second by Stacy. Any comments or questions?
I just have two questions. The director of special ed is underneath assistant superintendent. Has that been for a couple of years, or is that new this year?
No, that's been since I've been here.
Okay. And then at the high school, there's 3 assistant principals that seem to have about a third of the students.
Right.
It looks like there's overlap with students' last names H-I-J-K. Is that so there's some flexibility, or is that a typo?
It's a typo. I noticed that myself just now.
It's a typo.
Yeah.
Okay.
What should it be, Jeff?
It's Mr. Bennett is A through G, and then Ms. Fitzlop is H through N, and I'm O through Z.
Thank you.
It's the Wizard of Oz.
Good catch. Thank you. Other questions?
Any other questions?
Did you get all of those?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is American Education Week, which is November 11th to the 17th, 2012. And we have a proclamation, which I'll read. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they will need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality, and whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future, and whereas education employees, be they custodians or teachers, administrators or clerical staff, bus drivers or librarians, cooks or support staff, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism, and whereas our district, the community hub bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise, now therefore, the Prior Lake Savage Area School Board of Education does hereby proclaim November 11th to the 17th, 2012 as the 91st annual observance of American Education Week. That does not need approval, I don't believe. And if no one has any other comments, I'll move on to the next topic, which is Youth Appreciation Week proclamation. And I will read that as well. Whereas the vast majority of youth are concerned, knowledgeable, and contributing partners within the community, and whereas the accomplishments and achievements of these young citizens deserves the recognition and praise of the community, and whereas Optimist International has since 1954 developed and promoted a program entitled Youth Appreciation Week, and whereas the citizens of the Prior Lake Savage Area School District have indicated a desire to join the Optimists in expressing appreciation and approval of the contributions of youth, the District 719 Board of Education does hereby proclaim the 4th week of November as Youth Appreciation Week in the district. By this action, let it be known that we have faith in the ability of today's youth as they assume responsible roles in the future of mankind. That's it. I guess I have to go back just for a second. American Education Week, school board members will be in the schools. We are all assigned various schools in the district, and so we will be in the schools that week. And rumor has it there'll be some treats while we're there, so just to let you all know. And then during Youth Appreciation Week, there will be a luncheon where youth are acknowledged, and right now the date has escaped me. I think it might be
November 28th.
I'm not sure the date, pardon?
November 28th.
November 28th.
Yes.
That will be a luncheon held at Fonz for various youth in our district. Then moving on, we have no policies this evening, although we have been meeting. Move on to administrative reports. Sue Ann.
Yes. We have sent, or I have sent a letter to the previous members of our growth task force, notifying them of plans to reconvene after the first of the year to study our enrollment trends in our district, and included in that will be the results of a demographic study that we've commissioned, and that should be back for the board's first look on November 24th at a board study session, and then at December 10th at our next full board meeting. And that will begin that process. Kids voting is back. Community education is taking that over. And tomorrow from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m., our children will have an opportunity to vote with their families and their parents, so that is exciting. And then Teacher of the Year Honor Roll has been announced, and the celebration for that is February 18th in the afternoon at 3:30. So details will be on our website very soon about that upcoming date where we recognize that teacher at each building for the excellence in education. Our Prior Lake High School girls tennis team took 3rd place in the state this year, which is very exciting, very good tennis. It was really fun to be there and be a part of that. Our tennis coach, Chris Snyder, is the AA Coach of the Year, has been named that. And as many of you know, our Laker football team will be going back to the Metrodome for the 2nd time in 2 years on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. They'll be playing Lakeville North as they proceed with their campaign to win the state. And on Saturday, the girls' cross-country team competed in their 10th straight state race and came in 11th in the state. So it was very good. So lots of good, wonderful things happening. I know there's a band concert tonight going on right now that we all would like to have been a part of. And there have been many of our PAA events over the course of the last couple of weeks, and will continue into this next month. And with that, I think
That's it. Okay. Julie, do you have anything else to add this evening? You do?
I just wanted the board to realize that we use the P card system, or purchase card system in our district, and we did receive a check for just a little over $11,000 for the use of that. So we are seeing rebates coming back for our use of our purchase cards, and all of our district staff that require that have that opportunity to use it, and it is to help us to bring some money back to the district, and I just wanted to be aware of that.
Thank you. Great. Are there any board reports? Anything new at the high school that hasn't been mentioned? Okay. All right. Future events then. As we all must know, Election Day is tomorrow. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we will be canvassing our election results for the school board on November 13th at 7 a.m. here in the district office. And as mentioned earlier, we will have a community forum regarding the facility needs assessment on November 19th at 7 o'clock here. And we have a school board study session on November 26th at 6 o'clock. And the Youth Appreciation Luncheon is November 28th at Fonz at 11:30. And we have a board data retreat on December 3rd at 5 o'clock. And if there's no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Just a question, is Board Scholar Night next Sunday?
Yes.
Yes.
7 o'clock at the high school.
At the high school?
Anything else? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
By Tom, second.
Sorry.
By Todd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you.